Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Simplify Microservices with the NGINX Application Platform. I would like to introduce today's presenter, Liam, and he will take you through today's webinar. To ask any questions, please submit them via the question box, and Liam will answer them at the end of the webinar. Please note, a recorded version of this webinar will be available after the event. I would now like to hand you over to our host, Liam.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. As Stephen said, my name is Liam Crilly. I am Director of Product Management at NGINX, and we'll be talking today about the NGINX Application Platform. So by way of introduction, I'm sure many of you will know about NGINX, used it in the past, or I've seen our recent announcements about the application platform and a host of changes that are coming. We'll do a quick recap on NGINX and our story and how the application platform fits in. So, the story begins actually early 2000s with one guy, Igor Sisoyev, who was working as a sysadmin for a Russian internet portal company, similar to the sort of Yahoo of the day, and he was running into the problems that many at the time were facing with that period of growth on the internet, and with web servers and the early web applications really not being able to scale and handle a large number of concurrent connections. And that was the problem that Igor set out to solve. Quite simply, how to handle more connections on a single server. And this was circa 2001 when that original idea took hold. And then a few years later, 2004, Igor made the first open source release of NGINX 0.1, and a few years later, 2007, in Igor's own words, NGINX was viable for production use. Again, a few years after that, we hit an important milestone when the open source project was getting too big to manage by one person and a small group of contributors. And NGINX Inc. was founded as a commercial organization to maintain the open source project and to build commercial offerings based on it. And that also coincided in 2011 with the release of NGINX version 1, stable, production ready, and the base of the version used in powering many websites today. So following that, the first release of our enterprise product, our commercial offering, NGINX Plus, was in 2013. And that kind of brings us right up to date this year with the most recent release of NGINX Plus now at R15, and with our new application server, NGINX Unit, reaching 1.0. Coincidentally, on the same day of the year, 12th of April, as the 1.0 release of NGINX back in 2011. And today we're a global organization. This today's webinar is coming at you from a sort of combination of Cork and our Cambridge offices. In EMEA, we have be repeated this evening from our San Francisco office. Core engineering still takes place partly in Moscow, and we now have an Asia Pacific operation when our Sydney, Australia office opened just last week. There are, depending on the numbers, or your sources, well over 400 million websites running NGINX open source. We as an organization have over 1,500 commercial customers, and now well over 200 employees across those locations. And NGINX has become the de facto web server for high performance websites. Yeah, I'm just sure you know it's not the only option out there, but when you look at the stats for the busiest sites on the internet, it's clear to see that the busier the site, the more likely it is to be running NGINX. Where the top 100,000 sites, 56% of those will be running NGINX. And even more so when you look at the top 10,000 sites by traffic. We conservatively estimate that at least half the world's internet traffic passes through NGINX in one way or another. And so I expect that you've heard of NGINX and maybe you're using it in some part of your operation today. But it is a broad tool and it has a number of use cases, and people tend to know us for one particular use case or another. So looking at this, primarily people know us and deploy us as a reverse proxy, which sits between the clients on the internet and the back-end application or the website. And this provides a reliable endpoint for clients. It makes life easier for the back-end and improves overall performance. It allows you to enable high availability and scale out back-end applications and web servers by operating as a load balancer. And in addition, NGINX can cache static and dynamic content to improve the overall performance. So really a full sort of application delivery controller suite. But coming back to its origins, NGINX is also a high-performance and fully featured web server. It can serve static content. It can scale to hundreds of thousands of connections and simultaneous users on the same machine, the same piece of hardware. And NGINX is also often deployed as an application gateway, so that it handles the HTTP traffic coming in and passes that traffic in a smooth and controlled manner to the back-end application, whether that's PHP, Ruby, Java, using protocols such as FileCGI, UWSGI, maybe Linux sockets. And we'll see how NGINX Unit, our own application server, is starting to disrupt that model. So together, NGINX gives you all the tools you need to deliver your application securely and reliably. And NGINX works in all environments, whether it's a highly vertically scaled piece of bare metal hardware optimized for absolute maximum network throughput, such as you might find at some of the world's largest CDNs, or in a virtualized environment, whether on-premise or a public or a private cloud environment, and enabling hybrid clouds where the same application stack, the same components can be used regardless of where they're deployed. And of course, also in containerized environments. And NGINX is very often the first stepping stone that organizations take on their way to containerized environments. And I'm sure that that's a big part of the reason why NGINX has been spent so long as the #1 container on Docker Hub with the most pools and the most stars. Its inherent lightweight architecture and small footprint makes it a very efficient component in a containerized environment, and also as a sidecar for an application inside a container. So the NGINX Application Platform is more than just about NGINX open source and NGINX Plus. It's something we announced at our annual user conference last September with the goal of simplifying the architecture of microservices applications. And so just recently we made 2 major updates to the application platform, and with a 3rd planned later this quarter. There's a major shift happening as enterprises drive change within their business and look to digital transformation to make that happen. The need to stay competitive is driving huge investments in transforming the way organizations deliver value to customers and how they interact with those customers. It also affects the way they work internally with business partners to deliver value and operate in an ecosystem with high efficiency. And the typical enterprise has many applications, sometimes tens, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands. And these applications have different levels of urgency and importance and applicability to digital transformation. Not all of them will warrant the same levels of investment when it comes to modernization. And not all are destined or indeed suitable to become microservices. So sure, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there are many applications that, although working in the functional sense, don't offer the flexibility or agility needed by the business. And so you need to assess and make choices about each application. Do we amputate the failing limbs from the monolith and give it a new lease of life? Or do we re-architect for microservices and build for the future? And these are decisions that need to be analyzed per application to choose the appropriate investment, because the choices are complex and very varied. This is the cloud native landscape from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and it sets out to show you the full breadth of the stack that's available when designing modern applications, in particular microservices applications. So as you think about moving your critical applications to microservices, you have to confront a wide variety of tools, point solutions. Many of these are very new and unproven. But they're evolving quickly. Not all will have enterprise support, and enterprises and organizations quickly realize that it's a risky endeavor as they look to examples from those who have gone before to find best practice and not make costly mistakes. And this is where NGINX comes in. So we have a simple set of consistent capabilities, enabling organizations to modernize applications using familiar and well-proven tools. When you think about the wide variety of use cases that NGINX can be deployed as, from application server to an API gateway, sidecar proxy, caching load balancer, and you consider the range of the supported deployment platforms, it's no surprise that NGINX has become a key component for many organizations deploying microservices in production. The benefit you get is there are no compromises in functionality, regardless of the use case that you choose or the application environment that you deploy onto, which means that you retain portability across all platforms, meaning that your solution works everywhere that you need it to, and why NGINX is becoming the application network standard. The capabilities that we offer can be organized and deployed flexibly. So our solution enables you to design your application however it makes sense to you, and then assemble the right network components in the configuration that suits your network environment. So if you want to deploy NGINX as a front-end load balancer and content cache at one part of the stack, and also deploy NGINX as an API gateway closer to the services, that's all good. If you want to operate sidecar proxy inside a container, you've got a single functional component that can be deployed in all these places and in all of these platforms, starting from the without having to look further afield for other components. And so we recently announced major updates to the application platform, 3 new product releases used by many for 3 key use cases. And we've been having ongoing conversations with our customers who are deploying microservices in production today to make sure that our future roadmap is aligned with the needs of running microservices applications in production. So we have releases of NGINX Plus, NGINX Unit, and NGINX Controller to simplify infrastructure. We know that NGINX is the de facto standard for production microservices deployments. We have 3 million instances of NGINX open source being used for production, and 250 of our existing commercial customers using NGINX in their microservices production deployments today. And so we're building on that leadership and providing customers with more options for deploying NGINX as an API gateway, an ingress controller for Kubernetes, and in a service mesh. And so here's a somewhat sanitized real-world example of an NGINX customer and what their architecture looked like as they started to transition from monolithic apps to microservices. And you can see that there are there's a very large number of individual components. We've got multiple load balancers separate to the API gateways, separate to the WAF, all of which come with their own set of management tools and monitoring, alerting functions, configuration concepts, and deployment tools. And the focus on the application got lost on the effort required to maintain this complex environment. And this is by no means a unique situation to find yourself in when deploying microservices applications. And so what we were able to do for this customer is provide an application architecture that reduced 13 separate components down to 3 solutions, with NGINX Controller as a unified control plane, NGINX and NGINX Plus as the data plane for managing network traffic, and NGINX Unit as the application server co-located with NGINX as a sidecar proxy to deliver the microservices applications. So this provided a drastic reduction in tools that required care, feeding, maintenance, upgrades and updates. And now the organization can go back to focusing on what matters most to them, their application, and their transitions from monoliths to microservices. So here's the application platform, and we've made several updates already this year. We'll go into a little detail as to what's new. Firstly, although it's already April, but we've made 4 updates, some very significant to the NGINX open source project. NGINX Plus R15 was released April 10th. NGINX Unit went fully GA with the 1.0 release on April 12th. And NGINX Controller Release 1 will be available later this quarter. So, releases that we've made so far. NGINX Plus R15 now comes with support for gRPC proxy, which is particularly useful in a service mesh and sidecar environment. For the web servers, we have HTTP2 server push. Clustering with NGINX Plus now extends to sharing the state across instances in the cluster. That's beyond state sharing that's between worker processes in a multiprocessor environment. We have fully supported OpenID Connect integration for web single sign-on, and numerous updates to our JavaScript modules, which allow you to extend NGINX and NGINX Plus with JavaScript code, making it very easy to implement custom business logic or enhanced use cases with a well-understood language. And we've released NGINX Unit. So Unit is our new application server. It runs application code, and it supports multiple languages on the same instance. So you don't configure NGINX Unit for one language or another. Unit is Unit, and you configure the applications that you wish to run on it. And those applications can either be written in Go, Perl, PHP, Python, or Ruby, all of which are supported at 1.0. And we'll be adding additional capabilities and additional languages on the NGINX Unit roadmap. The configuration for Unit is fully dynamic. It's API driven, so that you can make API version changes. You can deploy new versions of an application or switch an application from running on language A to language B without any interruption of service. And new with 1.0 is that for production reasons, we have access logging now in NGINX Unit. It is still a relatively new project, but these are the foundational pieces. which make it ready for production workloads. An NGINX controller will launch with release 1 later this quarter. NGINX controller provides centralized monitoring and management for not only NGINX and NGINX Plus, but also for NGINX Unit, so that all of the components that make up your microservices application can be seen through a single pane of glass with a single monitoring, alerting, and analytics function. And all of this configured and managed with a REST-based API for automation integration to help you deploy and manage your applications in production. So let's look at the announcements that we've made and the new features that are available overlaid onto the simplified microservice application architecture that we just saw. We have NGINX Plus as a control plane, providing dashboards, alerts, and the configuration of NGINX Plus as a load balancer. Integration with Istio is a roadmap item, so that the control plane of Istio can also be viewed and centralized and managed through controller. NGINX as a web server with HTTP2 server push support, so that when a web browser requests a homepage, all of the associated assets for that homepage, whether it be style sheets or images, can be pushed back to the browser before the browser has to ask for it, improving user experience. NGINX Plus as a load balancer, now with high availability clustering, state sharing, and with enhanced OpenID Connect capabilities for Web Single Sign-On. And NGINX Plus, when deployed as a sidecar proxy with gRPC support, so that we can perform inspection, routing, and load balancing of gRPC traffic directly inside the container. And then, right at the heart of the application server, with polyglot language support, a fully dynamic configuration API, and in our early testing, performance gains of at least 30% with all the languages above over the traditional application servers. And this is the NGINX Application Platform. What it boils down to is that NGINX is focused on giving enterprises the tools and solutions that they need to simplify their application infrastructure, ease their modernization journey by allowing simplicity to extend across the stack, be flexible enough to support organizations wherever that journey takes them, however long or short they need that journey to be. So with that, I'll turn over to questions, and I will just leave a slide here with some additional resources on the specific components of the application platform if you want some further reading. I will start checking for questions. All right, so first question I can see here from Thomas is, why is Node.js not supported by NGINX Unit? So, firstly, there's a large overlap between Node.js and NGINX Unit. We do have plans to support JavaScript and Java as applications on NGINX Unit. So, although we're not trying to build something which is equivalent to Node.js, we do want to support the JavaScript language, and there'll be some natural overlap there. So the R&D, as I recall, is design phase is planned later in this year. So we might start seeing some early capabilities for JavaScript support in NGINX Unit towards the end of this year. Okay, I think there's another question coming through. So yes, question from Raymond, is there a document for reference architectures? Yes, there is. There is an excellent blog series on the NGINX.com website. I think there are, as I recall, 7 or 8 sections which talk about not only microservices in general, but 3 different microservices reference architectures using NGINX Plus, often abbreviated to MRA, Microservices Reference Architecture. And if you search for that term on the NGINX.com website, you will get some reference architecture information there, Raymond. Okay, question from Stojan, how to configure authentication using JWT, JSON Web Tokens. There are, again, some numerous resources on JWT authentication. NGINX Plus has a native module for JSON Web Token support. It means that if a JSON Web Token is presented, first of all, the JSON Web Tokens can be required, so that proxies will not, NGINX will not pass requests without there being a valid JSON Web Token somewhere in the request, and we can configure where it is. So then we can validate that that token is valid, that the signature matches, that the validity period is correct, and we can either then proxy that that request with the JSON Web Token as is, but a great capability is that we can treat the claims and the headers of the JSON Web Token as just additional attributes of the HTTP request. So if you want to perform rate limiting based on the subject in the JSON Web Token, you can do just that. So I would suggest hit nginx.com, search for JWT, and you'll see some nice examples and some configuration samples as well for how to set that up. I've got a few questions here about NGINX Unit. So is NGINX Unit, great question here from Marco, is NGINX Unit supposed to be some kind of alternative for Docker? How are the applications involved in Unit? So it's depending on how you use Docker, it's possible to consider NGINX as an alternative, but really the overlap is quite small. NGINX Unit does provide a level of isolation between applications. So whilst you can run multiple applications with a single instance of NGINX Unit, and each of which have isolated memory and can run in different security contexts under different user accounts, that covers some of the capabilities, some of the benefits that containers give you, but it doesn't give you shrink-wrapped units of deployment. It doesn't give you complete isolation that you get with Docker. And there's a great discussion on this point on one of the Unit blog posts. So no, the intention is not to be an alternative to Docker, although there are some areas where we provide similar capabilities. What operating systems does Unit run on? So it will run on pretty much all flavors of Linux and FreeBSD. If you visit unit.nginx.org, you'll get the full details there. Another question about Unit. If I understand, yes, from Thomas, if I understand correctly, I can drop PHP FPM and configure Unit in that place. Is that correct? Yes, absolutely. So NGINX Unit is an application server, and it can run PHP code, which means that all you need is Unit. A clarification from Marco, how multiple NGINX Unit instances know each other. So this is something else that is planned and benefits greatly from the NGINX controller, where one instance of Unit is aware of another instance of Unit, they can therefore share information about which applications are running on which instances. And this greatly simplifies the ability for microservice applications to communicate with one another. And in a way that's somewhat simpler to the service mesh architectures being discussed and deployed today. So that's a roadmap item that is very much enabled by controller providing a discoverability for individual NGINX unit instances to know about each other. And it greatly simplifies east-west traffic in that case. So, and just to follow up Marco's question a little further, comparing Docker Swarm, which creates a mesh network, Unit will have a slightly simpler mesh because applications communicating between each other on the same instance of NGINX Unit don't need an overlay network. Networking is only required between instances of NGINX Unit themselves, which gives an alternative to a full service mesh, and I think a more efficient use of network traffic between applications. Question again for probably last question from Marco. He's got some great questions about Unit here. Versions of PHP and Go are supported. Go I'm not 100% sure about, but with PHP we support both versions 5 and 7, and both can coexist on the same instance of NGINX Unit. So you can have versions of NGINX Unit running both PHP 5 and PHP 7 together. Controller question. So when is NGINX Controller available? It is going through the final engineering and QA stages right now. It will be available in Q2. The final date has not yet been set, so that's a case of watch this space. Question from Raymond about performance benchmarking tools. So I'm guessing this is in relation to the claim of 30% performance increases with NGINX Unit over the other application servers. We have performed some internal testing ourselves. This is fairly lightweight. 30% figure we obtained from a blog that we saw that someone had written doing some early testing with NGINX Unit. Right now I don't have the link I can share with you, but I will, when we put these slides up on SlideShare, I'll add a reference to that particular entry so that you can see it. Okay, question from Nick, thinking about web applications on .NET and being available via Amazon Web Services, Elastic Load Balancers. Did I miss the first part of that question? Yes, I did. So does NGINX make it easy to protect the main API portion by OAuth, but expose a Swagger page unauthenticated and dealing with the alias of URL? So yeah, this is bread and butter NGINX use case. You can choose which URIs or which patterns are public, which are private, and for those that are private, how to initialize the authentication process to make that happen. So you can absolutely do that for your .NET applications, regardless of where they're hosted. It's a standard function of a high-performance reverse proxy and load balancer. And a question from Thomas, is there a publicly available deployment version of controller to try it right now? No, unfortunately not. We've just closed off our private beta stage with a number of customers, and so we're using that feedback to make the final changes to NGINX Controller Release 1. And as soon as that goes GA, there will be a demo and a trial option available for that. Right now, there is not while we make those final engineering changes. Okay, so just scanning for some more questions. Okay, it looks like that's it. So thanks everyone for attending the webinar. I really appreciate you spending some time this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are, to learn about the application platform from NGINX. Hope to speak to you again soon on an upcoming webinar. So thanks again. I'll just hand back to Stephen to wrap it up.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you all for attending today's webinar and for your great questions. We hope you found the webinar beneficial, and we look forward to having you on board again soon.